It's your Wednesday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Hope you guys got clear of all the snow that came down on Tuesday. That was a lot. They were right. We got a lot of the snow. Sometimes the the undefined the weather predictors, who do a great job of it, the science and technology of that has gotten a lot better, even if there's some competing models. Sometimes the overestimates make people say, it's all overblown. No, they got that was right. They got a lot of snow and spent a lot of time clearing that out on Tuesday. But you know what? That is life in Minnesota, even if it is still just November, the last day of November, as it were. So that's not what we're going to talk about all day today. We're not going to spend 30 to 35 minutes talking about the weather. We're going to talk about sports. Got to get to the Timberwolves here in just a little bit. Chris Hine from the Star Tribune joins me to talk about that team. Timely appearance by Chris, finding out Tuesday the full diagnosis of Karl-Anthony Towns, that he'll be out for several weeks with a calf strain. What does that mean for the Wolves, who are already struggling in some areas and trying to figure out their own identity at 10-11 now this season after 21 games? Get to a St. Thomas item that interested me. Good column by Lavelle E. Neal III in today's paper and on StarTribune.com. First, though, what did I miss? Let's talk World Cup soccer for a minute, because I think mostly we are beyond the conversation of soccer's boring, I can't get into it. I think there's less and less of that out there, the kind of, the purely lazy take of, soccer, there's nothing in soccer for me. And if soccer isn't for you, that's fine. Not everybody has to like every sport. Not everything appeals to everybody. I think there's music that I like that I can't get anybody else to like, and that's fine. You don't have to make someone else like what you like. But on the same hand, I think there's been a lot of, over the years, resistance to even trying soccer, and I think we're past that now. People have decided whether they like it or not. They're not wholly, just saying, soccer, no, not for me. I'm not even going to try it. It's taking over the United States, things like that. It's that I think we're beyond. What I do want to say is, even if you aren't into soccer in the purest sense, if you like other sports better, which I do, I like soccer, but there's definitely other sports that I follow way more closely than soccer. But I can appreciate a good soccer match. That World Cup match between the U.S. and Iran on Tuesday was pure drama. In fact, this whole qualifying round for this whole group play for the U.S. has been a test of nerves. The England game, maybe not as much, because there wasn't quite as much at stake. I guess if they could have won that game, it would have put them in a much better position. But even a loss in that game was going to set up pretty much the same scenario on Tuesday, which was win or go home, by virtue of their draw against Wales in the opener, and by virtue of Iran beating Wales. This was a winner-take-all game. U.S. wins, they get through. If Iran manages at least a tie, they get through. And so for that reason, there was a ton of drama in this game. The U.S. takes a 1-0 lead late in the first half. Christian Pulisic, a great goal, sacrifices his body, ends up having to leave after halftime. Took a shot to the midsection. Looked like something I would not have wanted to have happen to me. Let's put it that way. But he stayed in the match, at least after it happened, but it left at halftime. The U.S. ends up scrambling for a lot of the second half, playing in a pretty defensive posture. Kind of felt like the end of that Wales game where they conceded the tying goal late. But against Iran, they're holding on, bringing on defensive reinforcements. And I guess the bigger point I want to make is this. It reinforced the nature of sports and psychology all at once, in that when you are watching a team that you are rooting for trying to hold a lead, it is far more nerve-wracking in my experience than when you're watching a team trying to retake or take a lead or draw even in something. If you're watching a Wild game and they're down 3-2 and they're pressing to try to score a goal, that you want them to score a goal. You're watching them, and it is some pressure. Not pressure on you, but you sense that pressure. You feel the pressure. It is much greater when you're watching a team trying to defend a 1-goal lead. Just because it's the nature of psychology, right? We seek things. We seek to avoid pain far more than we seek to avoid immediate pleasure. And so when you're watching a team trying to defend, trying to hold on to something, and you can imagine losing that, and in this case, 1 goal making the difference between, a draw which sends you home or a win that sends you through, that becomes extremely nerve-wracking. So the second half of that match against Iran was just completely bonkers. It was exhausting to watch, even if you didn't have a huge stake in that game. The Olympics, the World Cup, if you get into them, it's largely because you are rooting for the country where you are, your country. You're rooting for the United States by and large. If you live here, and that adds an element to it. But the holding on to a lead, that was such a moment of just 45 minutes of sheer agony watching that game until that final whistle blew in the 9 minutes of stoppage time at the end of that game. Iran coming close on a couple plays, trying to get a penalty that would get them, trying to get them to draw level. I thought the officiating was really good. I thought they did a good job of not giving into that, but so much drama in that game. The U.S. does get through, almost this huge exhale when that game is over. The U.S. gets through to play the Netherlands on Saturday in the round of 16, but it was in such contrast to the exhilaration of 2010 when Landon Donovan scored the goal against Algeria to send them through to the round of 16, a late goal. That was exhilaration, right? You were, if you're watching that game, there was plenty of drama in that game, but going ahead at the end feels like this great moment of, ecstasy in some cases if you are a huge soccer fan. Holding on to a 1-0 lead, a completely different feeling, even if the outcome is the same. But larger point being, the U.S. does get through a really smart, really good group play for the U.S. I think they got 3 matches that will really benefit them going forward. And anybody who roots for this team can now have a few days at least to regroup, because that was an emotional ringer that you went through on Tuesday afternoon.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake. With 24/7 gaming, the good times never have to end. And you can satisfy your cravings at our restaurants and bars. Or relax in one of our luxurious hotel rooms. Those that play together, stay together. And don't forget to join Club M so you can spark new memories and bask in the rewards along the way. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
So the Timberwolves announced on Tuesday as well that Karl-Anthony Towns will be out several weeks. That was their term. He'll be reevaluated at that point. A calf strain that forced him out of Monday's game, lost in Washington. So he's going to miss a lot of time. I mean, whatever the timetable ends up being, let's just say it's somewhere in the 4 to 6 week range, as our Chris Hine reported, and I'll talk to him about that in a little bit. If it's somewhere in there, that's a good, 15, 20 games, depending on how fast he might come back. Kind of about the same length of time that they've already played this season. So plenty to ponder there. And so I wanted to pick Chris's brain on some of the bigger picture stuff with this team, but also the impact of that injury and what that means for them going forward. So let's bring in Chris Hine right now, Timberwolves beat writer for the Star Tribune. We'll talk a few things, Karl-Anthony Towns, but I also want to talk, Chris, just kind of big picture, because even before Towns went down Monday night, the Wolves were getting run for the second consecutive game, ended up being their third straight loss after a 5-game winning streak. So they're now on the negative side of 500 again. And, the familiar questions resurfacing about consistency of performance, consistency of effort, and then just the defensive lapses we've seen without Jaden McDaniels and some other key pieces in the lineup these last couple games. What did you make of first the 5-game winning streak, and then what you've seen since then? Is it kind of par for the course for this year's team and even a year ago's team when they just didn't seem to get any sense of consistency at a certain point?
Yeah, that's kind of it. It's I think in some ways this is who this group is. They're inconsistent, sometimes, maddeningly so for the fan base. Um, I think the 5-game win streak, they really benefited from opponents being shorthanded, especially in the early part of that win streak. They faced an Indiana team that wasn't really that shorthanded, and they had their best performance of the season against them last Wednesday. So you go into that Friday game against Charlotte thinking, all right, just roll that performance over. You have another team that's shorthanded without a lot of key contributors. If you even give a C+ effort Friday in Charlotte, you win that game probably. But the second half was just a disaster. And it's hard to say who this team really is based on the last couple of weeks. It seems like they're more of the team that was here in the beginning of the season instead of a team that was trending in the right direction. And that was just confirmed really with these last 2 nights. Now they have been hit with the injury bug. I mean, outside of Karl going out Monday night, you have Taurean Prince, Jordan McLaughlin, Jaden McDaniels, who have all missed at least 2 of these last 3 games here. Those are 3 significant pieces that we're seeing heavy minutes that have been out. So, Jaden McDaniels, I don't think it's a surprise that perimeter defense and ball containment has suffered these last 2 games without your best perimeter defender in the lineup. That's, it seems like an easy correlation there. Jordan McLaughlin, we've seen, especially in that Charlotte game, we saw instances of the offense kind of going stale again and stagnant. And Jordan McLaughlin helps inject that life into the offense, especially at moments when it may be sagging. So, they've now been hit with some unfortunate injuries, and they haven't really been able to overcome them yet.
Now, McDaniels is a big piece. I wanted to talk about that because you're right. Those 2 games he missed, they gave up 137 to Golden State and over 140 to Washington. It is a little telling, though, that you take one piece out of that. And granted, he's got a lot of defensive skills, just length and lateral quickness and ability to switch and get out on the 3-point shooter, stuff like that. He does a lot on defense, but it is a little telling that when he goes out, and I guess, in tandem with Taurean Prince already being out too, which kind of takes 2 similarly bodied people, even if their games are a little different, takes them both out of the mix, but that they don't have someone else who can step up and at least adequately fill that role. And whether that's unable or unwilling, someone like Anthony Edwards could have been more of a defensive presence in those games, and he just simply was not. So it is a little telling that if they have, significant, but, Karl notwithstanding, and we'll get into that in a minute, before he went out, the injuries were to players who were important but are not part of their, core 3 or 4 star, highly paid, or, first, number 1 overall pick like Anthony Edwards type players. They're more of the supporting cast than they are the stars that have been out.
Right. That's to say, I'm not sure how well this team is able to withstand even that sort of jolt to its rotation, or they're just not in that comfortable place yet, because we've seen the starting group have its ups and downs throughout the course of the season here. So I just am not sure that this team, the progress isn't linear in the NBA. A lot of times it's more like an up and down kind of chart, a heart rate chart or something like that.
Yeah,
it's peaks and valleys, and they go from having their highest peak of the season, 5-game win streak, best performance of the season, to a 3-game stretch that rivals some of those really ugly games in the first 2 or so weeks of the season. And one of the things that came out of the locker room, and I hope to write about it over the course of the next few days here, is I still think this team is searching for leadership
Yeah.
and trying to figure out who those voices are. And there's a lot of different voices in the locker room and people that speak up. And so I hope to write a little bit about that. Chris Finch pointed to Ant as trying to emerge as more of a leader. People like Rudy, Kyle Anderson, Austin Rivers, Torian Prince has been that for them. So it's also a team that is finding itself on the court, but also kind of behind the scenes with who is leading this team moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's been evident on the court, especially when they get into these ruts where Golden State had like a 25-2 run or something like that. The leadership, I mean, that's leadership right there, being able to stop a run like that, to regroup, to not let an 8-2 run spiral into something much bigger. And that's where those last couple games have been, to a certain degree, won and lost, right? Like Golden State and Washington both put up huge, stretches in the first half. And at that point, you've got such a hill to climb, it's hard to get back up. And I think that seems to be wearing on Finch a little bit, just that inconsistency or not being able to stop that. Although I thought it was interesting, his post game Monday, I listened to some of it, and he did reference, playing some of their best games, including the Indiana game, that 5-game win streak, and then feeling like, they might feel like they're millions of miles away from that now. But he seemed to indicate he doesn't think it's that great of a distance. It's more of a matter of cleaning up things like turnovers and transition defense. I'm not sure I quite see it that way, but I'm curious how you saw it and what you thought of that answer.
Yeah, I kind of like something he said in his pregame availability, which was, it seems like they have their fingers in the dike, and they plug one hole and then something else reemerges, and it could be something that they thought was fixed.
Sure.
What like transition defense or perimeter ball contained defense. It's those things tend to lag, I guess, at different times. It's never really truly fixed. So I think that's where they're at. It's these old problems, or problems that were there earlier in the season, are suddenly cropping back up for whatever reason, whether it is some of these guys that are missing, or just general lack of attention to detail. So I think that's where they're at. It's not like new problems are being created. It's old problems that they can't seem to permanently fix.
I think one of the frustrating pieces too is that, at the beginning of the year, and I don't know if they put a number on it, but I think a lot of us put a reasonable number on it, like, hey, give this 20 games. Let's see what this looks like after 20 games. And after 20 games, they were 10-10, and then they got, blown out by Washington, so now they're 10-11. And aside from the results, it doesn't feel like they're much closer to figuring it out than they were when they were 0-0. And you would at least like to see some evidence of, at least more consistent evidence of figuring some of that out. That piece of it, to me, maybe is the more concerning than just the flat out record.
Yeah, it's just so up and down. That's the big thing. And now we're going to see, like, how is this going to look potentially without Karl for a significant amount of time. And however that looks when he's out, it's going to just detract from the ability of this starting unit to develop and find its footing when you're missing one of the key players from it. So even if they kind of manage to get through whatever stretch of time here without Karl, it's when he comes back to the lineup, it's still going to be like, all right, well, how does this thing look? How does this thing work? Where does this group now pick up? And you just have to hit pause on that while Karl recovers.
And that's an interesting conundrum. I mean, that's a good transition point to talk about, what life without Towns might look like for, like you said, however long this is. They've kind of got two options. One of them is, play Naz Reid more, and Naz has had some good stretches. He's a very gifted offensive player, and he's kind of, like Karl light to a certain degree, a really good, versatile offensive game, shoots the three pretty well, has some, defensive deficiencies. Not the rim protector, I would say that even Karl is, but more of a similar player to Cat, and could kind of give them a similar look if they want to keep progressing along that path. Even if Cat wasn't getting those reps, the offense, the first unit, kind of getting similar reps that they might get with Cat. The other option is a lot more Kyle Anderson, and that feels like the option that's probably more suited to pair with Gobert as a more, a natural fit. If you're trying to win games, that feels like frankly a better solution if he can stay healthy. I know he's had some problems with staying healthy already this season as well. But what do you think about that conundrum, and how Anderson versus Reed fits alongside Rudy?
Yeah, I think those are the two logical choices to look at. I tend to think it would be Kyle Anderson. We'll see kind of what Jaden McDaniels' status is going forward. But if the big problem right now is defense, I tend to think that you probably have to go with Kyle Anderson at the 4. He kind of slots in naturally at the 4. And you can kind of figure out the offense around that. Nas will give you a little more, I think, offensive bang for your buck if you're struggling to score. But, defensively, that could maybe cause some issues. But if McDaniels is back, maybe you can get away with playing Nas there at the 4. There's a lot of possibilities of mixing and matching it. And I assume that throughout the course of the game, you're going to see both Nas Reed and Kyle Anderson playing alongside Rudy, most likely. Whether one starts or the other one, it's probably going to happen.
Now, I don't necessarily think this is going to be the case, but what if this looks, I'm going to say better, but what if the flow is better when it is Kyle Anderson and Rudy? This is assuming that there's at least a significant sample size that we can see. I mean, what if that happens?
I'm expecting you to then write a Karl-Anthony Towns trade column is what I'm expecting.
I mean,
trade.
I've already, right before he got hurt, it's not good that he got hurt. I never would say that, but I was concocting these wild conspiracy theories in my head because this has looked so ragged. Like, did they trade for Gobert knowing that they're going to have to trade Cat at some point, that this just never was going to work, but that was the opportunity to get Gobert? Like, I would never, those are not rational thoughts. Those are thoughts you think as you watch this team struggle. I don't think that's true. I am wondering though, what if this does look better? It's not going to look better in a sense of Cat's not on the floor. That's one of your best players. But what if the flow looks better with a more traditional 4-5 setup than having two true centers playing next to each other? That's going to present some conundrums going forward, I would imagine, if that did happen.
Yeah, it could, but also maybe it gives you a lineup or a group that you can turn to even when Cat comes back. That when Cat is not playing, and is resting, maybe you find a combination or a kind of a group of guys. It's like, hey, this 5-man unit can work pretty well together. Let's trot that out there for 9-10 minutes a night. So, you can still come up with that, but I don't look. The ceiling of this team is what it is with Karl-Anthony Towns, and
Yes.
if they have to figure out where that ceiling is, and it's that specific group of 5 people, that starting lineup is their ceiling. And it, for better or worse, they have to try and make that group work.
They haven't been shooting the ball particularly well from deep this season. And Cat, again, before the injury was on that list, is he shooting kind of in the low to mid 30s? And that's generally, he's usually, up around 40%. Did he have an answer for where his shot has been? Has it been feeling good? Is there something just in general why this team is being outpaced so badly on 3-pointers this year?
Yeah, he said, Friday when I asked him about it, that, he took 11 threes in that game, only made one of them. He said they all pretty much felt good to him. He thought, a lot of them were going in. It was just, they just weren't. And then Sunday I saw that, he's keeping his confidence up and took solace from Steph Curry struggling to start last season and then turning it around.
Sure.
So, he doesn't have a lack of confidence when it comes to that. So he's going to keep putting them up there. My question will be the volume with which he puts them up there is that going to change? Because the Wolves, it's been a thing with him over the years, like Cat should take more threes because he's such a good 3-point shooter. Well, he's having a rough start to the year. Does he pull back a little bit on the number of attempts now because he's not hitting them at such a high rate? That's what I'm curious to see moving forward once he's healthy again.
And I did worry about this a little bit being an issue just with him moving to the 4, that he was going to have guys guarding him on the perimeter more that were a little bit more adept at guarding the 3. When he was drawing centers out, he probably had a much better 3-point shooting matchup, didn't he?
Yeah, he would. I mean, you see it all the time with Karl when a team uses their center and their center alone to guard him, he usually is very successful. When he has power forwards and double teams coming his way, that's when he runs into a little bit of trouble. That's what that they called it the Utah defense, because that's what Utah did. They wouldn't put Gobert on him last year. They would put other people on him and double him, and use Gobert off of Towns. So yeah, he has the ability to just cook any opposing center that's guarding him. And they have to back off him because they're so afraid of his driving ability that he usually has some space to put up a 3. But with the 4s, they can get up a little more on him because they have the quickness maybe to keep up with him on the drive. And, they're paying more attention to him, sending more people his way as well on doubles.
I feel like Memphis did that to a certain degree last year in the playoff series as well. He kind of, Towns kind of played Steven Adams off the court at a certain point because Adams just couldn't come out and guard him or wasn't quick enough to guard him in other places. And Memphis was throwing a lot of different bodies on him with some success. Maybe that's a good segue for the here and now. They play Memphis Wednesday night. I'm sure there'll be some old thoughts creeping back in, the thought of that playoff series. But again, Wolves trying still to kind of become the team they want to be, and this is another measuring opportunity, regardless of who's on the court for them.
Yeah, and Memphis, I think, will bring out the best in the crowd as well. Will be interesting to see, kind of what this looks like against a top tier team. They're going to have to figure some things out really quickly here, and then the schedule does offer them a little bit of a break. They have a game on, I think, Saturday after they play on Wednesday, and then they don't play again until the following Wednesday. So just in terms of the number of games here over the next week, they only play 3 games. So, they have some time to figure things out, some practice sessions, time for guys to heal without missing too many games. So they will have a little bit of time to do all those things and maybe get a little healthier.
Well, we'll see how healthy they are and how well they play Wednesday night. Chris Hine, always love having you on Daily Delivery. Go get a little bit of rest, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good, Mike. Thank you.
I brought this up with Chris, but I want to ponder it just a little bit more because I wrote about this on Tuesday. It's still up on StarTribune.com. They're going to get a lot of information out of this period, and it's going to be an interesting mix of information, I would imagine, because what if they do play well when Towns is out? It's not necessarily going to be an indictment of Towns, but it could be an indictment of this idea, at least so far, that you can pair a couple of traditional centers, a 7-footer, even one as versatile as Towns, with Rudy Gobert and have success in the modern NBA. If they look better, if the offense flows, even if the record isn't, that much better without Towns, if they look more like the team you want them to be without one of their best players, it is going to raise some questions about the long-term, viability of the Towns and Gobert pairing. Even if I think we still have to give that more time, it's going to raise some questions going forward about that. If they don't play well without Towns, which is probably the more likely scenario because he is still one of their best players, I think they're built more this year to withstand something like that than they have been in past years. But if they don't play well and let's say they fall further under 500, and they start with Memphis tonight, and that is not an easy game by any stretch. Let's say they go on a little stretch here where they lose a decent number of games and fall further in the playoff race. That's going to hurt them just this year, right? I mean, by the time Towns comes back, it's going to be the midpoint of the season at least, you would think, or right around there. Can they sustain any kind of momentum after that to get back into the playoff race if they don't play well without him? So we're going to learn a lot in these next 15, 20, whatever games he misses, and how that information presents itself when he comes back will tell you a lot about the short-term, future of this team and the long-term implications as well. Let's finish with the cooler. Like I mentioned at the jump, Lavelle E. Neal had an interesting column on St. Thomas. They won the Pioneer League in just their second year of Division I. Now, Pioneer is a non-scholarship Division I FCS conference, but because of the rules and stipulations when they made the jump from Division III a couple years ago, they're not eligible for the playoffs. So a team they actually beat during the regular season, Davidson, got the bid from the conference to go to the postseason, and they still have 3 more years to wait before they're postseason eligible. Now, that's apparently quite a bit less than would normally be part of the process, but it does strike me as interesting that maybe this is a rule used to protect a team along the way, maybe to protect some financial interests as well. I'm sure everything is more money-driven than anything we ever know, but it does strike me as interesting, A, that they're this good already in Division I, even if this is a non-scholarship conference, and B, that they are, at least thinking about the idea of, does this rule need to be revisited? Should they be postseason eligible a little bit sooner based on how fast they have adapted to life in Division I? We'll be interested to see how that goes, but this is going to be interesting across the board. They're already getting some good basketball recruits. They're 6-3 right now this season. They've played some competitive games against some good teams. This is setting up to be. I'll be really interested to see where St. Thomas is in 5 years, 10 years on the local sports landscape. I think it's going to be an interesting addition to things even once they get built up even more, and already having a lot of success right now. That'll do it for today. We're going to talk to Marcus Fuller on a Thursday show, talk Gophers college basketball. Haven't talked much about the men's team yet this year, and some of what they're trying to accomplish. Big one coming up for them this weekend against Purdue, a very good team, kicking off Big Ten play. So we'll see how that goes for the Gophers, and we'll check in plenty with Marcus, who always speaks really knowledgeably about that team. That'll do it for today. Like I said, back at it tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you then.